Who is going to be in control of that robotic left arm? Who is going to be the person in charge of that Neuralink brain chip in your skull? It will probably be the person who owns Neuralink, right? And who is
Mm.
Elon Musk and what is his background and how did he become the richest man on earth, quote unquote, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, those are the types of things that unfortunately only 1 in 100 people will be interested to bother, researching.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining me, James.
Thank you for having me on.
Very excited to speak with you about loads of things. You are in a sphere. Yeah, I've followed you for quite a long time. You're in a sphere that I've sort of delved into more recently. It's fascinating coming from a younger generation and sort of trusting the news less and less and trusting the government less and less. I was one of the people who got my jabs, believed everything I was told, and it was really COVID for me that kind of started to shift my perspective on a lot of things, which I guess, in a way, fortunate to have had that experience. I don't know if COVID hadn't happened, I would have looked at things from a different angle, but you've been in this sphere for quite a long time. So I'm wondering, was there a particular event or piece of news or something that made you radically change and suddenly decide to start the Corbett Report, or was it a slow trickle of information?
I suppose if there was a COVID for me, it was 9/11.
Mm.
Obviously, the defining event of my young adulthood, anyway. Shortly after I graduated from university, 9/11 happened and obviously changed the world as we know it, as anyone who was alive at the time was told over and over. And we all saw those towers come down and we saw the war on terror start and all of the craziness of the 21st century. So that to me was a defining moment. And when it first occurred, I, I could not countenance the idea that there was any sort of conspiracy or anything that was beyond what we were being told. Of course,
Mm.
the Bush regime overreacted and there was blowback and all of that, but the idea that it was not as portrayed was basically too far beyond the pale for me. And I say that even as someone who has always been skeptical of official narratives. I don't think I ever believed that JFK was killed by a lone nut or
Mm.
anything along those lines. It just seemed 9/11 was a step too far. Maybe it was too soon to possibly question that. So it wasn't until 2006 that I really started to encounter 9/11 truth information and I really started to at least consider it. And once I did and started going down that rabbit hole, that's what set me along the path to starting the Corbett Report. I wouldn't say that 9/11 was the only thing that I was concentrating on at the time. It was a flood of information that I was coming across on the internet that made me interested in pursuing this in a more thoroughgoing manner. But it was 9/11 that was, I think, that first step down the rabbit hole.
Mm-mm. I'm fascinated. What was it like to sort of jump off at that point? Because you've got podcasts and the internet is blowing up at the moment with independent journalism, and whether or not that lasts is a different story altogether. But what was it like to sort of get in? I suppose at the introduction of independent journalism, really that first shift away from mainstream media, and sort of what's it been like carrying that through to now?
Yeah. Well, it's difficult, I guess, for me to have a good outside view of that because I was there living it. So I
Mm.
don't know what to compare it to. But clearly, I think the sense that we were undergoing some sort of revolution in terms of communication was palpable. And
Mm.
it was something that I just sort of understood by living through it rather than, encountering it as a phenomenon. I've found it funny over the past decade to watch whoever, Jordan Peterson and Tucker
Mm.
Carlson and all these older figures start to discover, oh, there's this thing called YouTube, and you can go on, and
Mm.
lots of people can see your work. It's funny to see that because, of course, I was sitting here 2 decades ago doing
Mm.
all of this online, and it just seemed like the natural thing. And perhaps maybe I was blessed in a way in the fact that I was living in Japan. And so it occurred to me that, yeah, I mean, I don't think street activism or going out there and starting events and what have you was really on the cards for me because in my broken Japanese, what was I going to do to a Japanese population? No, obviously, I was getting my information online. And so I would spread the information online. It just made perfect sense to me. So it was all very organic. There was nothing calculated about it. But obviously, that was part of the rising tide of what has become the flood of online independent journalism and everything that's become good and bad. I was just lucky enough to be in the right time, in the right place, in the right situation, with the right frame of mind to take advantage of that, but it wasn't something that I consciously did.
Mm. So when you started this sort of journey, did you find that, because this is what I find, is it's very, very difficult to talk to people around me about some of the things that I believe. Otherwise, they think I'm a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, which I probably am, partially. I do enjoy that. I love, chatting about UFOs and things like that. But I think there's quite a difference. And when you talk to people and they go, okay, well, they sort of put all the conspiracies in one big sphere. And it's like, well, no, there is a difference between UFOs and things like 9/11 or Iraq. Do you find that it's difficult to talk to people around you about just simple truths that you believe, but maybe don't have all the evidence for?
I suppose it can be, but honestly, I think it is more a question of one's communicative ability and what one is looking for in terms of communication, that kind of determines the outcome of those types of conversations. Because I suppose if I was the proselytizer type who was going into every conversation with an "I'm going to tell you how the world really works and you're going to listen to me," I suppose I would have encountered a lot more resistance over the years. But thankfully, I've had very little of that type of resistance. I have, of course, encountered eye rolls and other things from coworkers who hear what I'm talking about. But it's never particularly bothered me, and I don't particularly feel the need to personally evangelize to every single person and make them believe what I believe. So, because I don't have that kind of aggressive attitude when it comes to my conversations, I have friends who, some of them absolutely are in various stages of rabbit hole descent, and who do agree to some extent or another with at least some of my crazy ideas. I have some friends who absolutely do not care about any of this information, don't take it seriously, and don't care what I do online. And that's fine for me because they're my friends. And I don't define my friendships in terms of some sort of litmus test of what you must believe. I suppose there is a point at which one's beliefs start interacting with one's morals. And if people are involved in things that I've genuinely found immoral or reprehensible, I'd like to think that I would stand up to that. But generally speaking, I'm just looking for human relationships. And you know what? I'd like to have the humility to understand that I don't know everything in the world. I can get things wrong. I like to approach people with what can you teach me as much as what can I teach you. And I think if people go into conversation with that spirit, they will find a lot less of the people raising their hackles and getting into constant fights. I mean, if you meet one or two people who get into a fight with you because of what you believe, then that's probably on them. But if everyone you meet is fighting with you all the time, maybe it's on you.
That's a good point. Yeah, I do think people talk about it now more than ever, that the world is more polarized than it has been in a very long time. Is that a shift that you've seen in your time as an independent journalist? Do you think that's true,
Yeah,
or
there's
has it
no
always
doubt about
been?
that. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. There has definitely been a polarization of the population, and it's not even necessarily. Although obviously the left-right political paradigm has always defined that, and there's always been that tension. But it's not even along those lines anymore. Now it's some sort of more basic tribal identity, but there's still a bifurcation in the population that people are expected to pick a side, and more conversation, I suppose, these days involves people trying to suss out, are you on my side or their side, of whatever kind of civil war is brewing. Having said that, yes, I think part of that, I mean, to a certain extent, obviously the outcome of that is not a good thing. But the fact that it is happening, it may actually be an outgrowth of something that is good. Because I think it was the monoculture that was created by the monopolized corporate media of the late 20th, early 21st century. That paradigm in which everyone was reading the same books, watching the same movies, watching the same TV news. Everyone was thinking and talking along the same lines, and there was a very tightly defined Overton window. That created, I think, less of a space for this polarization of worldviews and this existential dread that people have when they're facing their ideological opponents. Yes, there was room for disagreement and argument, but not to the extent of what we have now, where people get into their online echo chambers and are completely isolated, worldviews completely different. But in a sense, as I say, maybe that's a good thing, because obviously I think the gatekeeping of information that was epitomized in that corporate media system is not a good thing for humanity. In fact, it was a very rare and strange moment in humanity's cultural history, that there was the ability for so few people to control so many people's thoughts and actions. That should be looked at as an aberration. And perhaps now we're returning to something more like normality, where people can actually interact with each other and help shape each other's opinions. Unfortunately, of course, now we're starting to drift into the area where, well, if all of the communication you're having is online, how many of those people that you're communicating with online are real people, authentic people? How many people are trolls? How many people are paid agents? How many people are just bots? And what does that mean about the future of our conversations? Anyway, I'm not saying it's all a good thing, but I think that the breakup of the media monopoly of the late 20th century, for good and ill, is something that needed to happen.
Yes, a good point. It's like the diversification of ideas, and it's, I guess, like even Noam Chomsky is a bit out of date now because we're not all getting our news from one source. But you do have this problem now of like who controls the narrative, and this is obviously something you talk about a lot. Is like, what are we shifting to? There's literally, I think I saw this morning the Facebook lawsuit, and their whole argument is free speech. And you go back a couple of years ago, you got the Twitter files with Matt Taibbi and the CIA and the FBI controlling the narrative around COVID. I guess I'll shift this monologue into asking you, because you, from what I understand, you your channel got shut down over COVID. You'd never had anything like that before. Was that the first time that anything was so extreme that it shut down what you were trying to produce?
Yes, it was the first outright censorship that I encountered. So for people who don't know, yes, my YouTube channel was shut down. I always forget the date. I believe it was in 2021. And it was, I mean, it's difficult to say exactly what, because they give you multiple warnings and 3 strikes and all of this. And so it was on a diverse array of content, but it was mostly COVID related thought crimes, which, of course, things that you could absolutely, totally talk about and be fine with these days were, for people who don't remember, were being very thoroughly scrubbed off of YouTube at that time. And my channel was a victim to that. I was also taken, well, permanently suspended off of Patreon. They don't actually outright, remove your account and say that you're no longer able to use Patreon, because I think there might be legal repercussions to that. So they just permanently suspend you, at least until such time as you can prove that you have, deleted whatever content they say that is violating, but they won't actually tell you what content is violating their community standards, which are vaguely defined anyway. It's all nonsense. And that nonsense was, I think, put into laser sharp focus last year, when, for absolutely no reason whatsoever, I didn't change anything about what I'm saying or what I'm doing, but YouTube reviewed my account closure and decided, you know what, actually your channel was not in violation of community guidelines. Oopsie, here's your channel back. And so I've been back on YouTube for the past year. Why? Well, I don't know. Again, they're not going to explain that to you. So anyway, the outright censorship, yes, that was absolutely insane. It was jaw-dropping. But I don't think that that's actually the most insidious form of censorship. Because for me, yes, cut out a man's tongue and all you're doing is proving that you fear what he has to say. But much, much more insidious than that is the algorithmic censorship, which has been ongoing for at least a decade. I at least palpably, demonstrably, in terms of my own content, I know that there was a switch flipped about a decade ago. And in that time, from that time frame, my videos, my channel went from being promoted at least to people who were looking for political content, etc., and being on the sidebar of YouTube and being out there in a widely accessible way, to being more and more shunted off to the side, difficult to find, not being promoted as much, not being recommended to people, to the point where in 2017 or 2018, you had incidents like MSNBC host Chris something or other. I'm glad I forgot his name, because he's so inconsequential I don't care. But anyway, some MSNBC host went on a tweet tirade about, imagine if you're a high school student and you're tasked with writing an essay about the U.S. Federal Reserve, and you come across this, and he posts a screenshot of my Federal Reserve documentary, Century of Enslavement. And basically this whole tweet tirade was about how misinformation is spreading on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. And wouldn't you know it, amazingly enough, the very next day, if you went, I should clarify, before that point, if you typed Federal Reserve into YouTube, my documentary was the #1 result. Just from the general YouTube search, Federal Reserve, you would get my documentary. The very next day after that tweet tirade, you would type in Federal Reserve. No, certainly I wasn't on the top list. You go scrolling through. No, it's not there. So even if you typed in the exact title of my documentary, Century of Enslavement, the History of the Federal Reserve, nope, couldn't find it. You could find other people reposting it on their channels, but you could not find it on my channel. Even if you put Corbett Report, Century of Enslavement, Federal Reserve documentary, whatever you put in, absolutely unobtainable. And that was the first time like I really palpably noticed that. And then it was applied more and more often as I approached the black hole of the account takedown, to the point where I think the last major documentary production that I did before the YouTube channel was scrubbed was my Who is Bill Gates documentary, which I released in 4 parts. Obviously, right there in the height of the COVID craziness. Yeah. And the first part of that, about how Bill Gates monopolized public health or global health or whatever the exact title was, got 1 million views in a week or two. It was very, very popular. And then the subsequent parts, 1/10 of that, 1/20th of that, 1/30th of that. And again, subsequently, no matter what search term you used, no matter how you tried to look for that video, it was absolutely, you could not find it on YouTube. So to my mind, that is the more insidious form of censorship. If you just completely scrub my channel, at least you prove the point that you fear what I'm trying to say and the information I'm trying to put out there. But if you just tinker and with the algorithms and the search results and the recommendations until such point as basically no one sees your work, and then that becomes the sort of the social proof of, look at this crazy fringe conspiracy theorist. No one's looking at his work. Look how tiny few views he has, whereas this other person has millions of views. Therefore, you should trust them. It becomes that sort of system. So to my mind, that's the really insidious form of censorship that I don't think people appreciate as much, because it's the kind that you can't see, but is there.
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't know all the terms for it, but shadow banning comes to mind, where you sort of like silently switch something off. And that was a big thing, again, in the Twitter files, Cambridge Analytica. I'm sure you've seen the news recently about, I think they're calling it the Trusted News Initiative in the UK, Trusted News Source, where they're going to put into law that you sort of like boost the BBC and ITV and then you kind of silence other people. It really does. It's really annoying that it does feel like we sort of find something out in a scandalous way, something like Cambridge Analytica, whether it be the Brexit vote or the Trump election, that they used certain votes. And you've got the Tech Watch project, which I believe Robert Epstein, where they track the way Google can sort of like push things up or switch things off depending on where you are in the world. And they can one of the things they do is they'll remind certain people of certain demographics to go and vote, but not other people. And it feels like we sort of find that out over 10 or 20 years, and everyone kind of just gets used to the idea, NSA scandal, and then they go, oh no, we're just going to do this now, where the British government goes, we're just going to change the news, we're going to support some things and not others, because misinformation and disinformation, and though there's been a debate about that ever since that whole conversation has come about, arguably with the Russiagate scandal and what is misinformation, and now every mainstream news source has disinformation experts on their channel, but it's still a hot topic debate, I think, on whether or not that's legit or not. People just come out and they go, no, there is misinformation, we're going to just do this now. It's just kind of a horrifying thing. I'm curious, I sort of asked you before we started, what was the move to Japan about? Was that to get away from all of that stuff, or was it did you go to Japan for love? Was it completely unrelated to all of this, or why did you move there in the first place?
I know people, when they find out that I live in Japan, generally assume, oh, you must have gone there to get away from the Canadian
It's the first thing that springs to mind. Yeah,
right. But actually, no. My move to Japan preceded the Corbett Report, or literally anything like the Corbett Report. It wasn't even a twinkle in my eye when I moved to Japan. That was before I went down the 9/11 rabbit hole or started encountering this information. No, I came Essentially, after graduating from the University of Calgary, spent a year working in Calgary, and then I decided, oh, I want to see the world. I want to go somewhere else. So I went to Dublin, Trinity College Dublin, to study Anglo-Irish literature, get my master's
Mm.
MPhil degree in Anglo-Irish literature, and then after that, now I had a student debt to pay back because
Ah.
it was not cheap to live in Dublin for a year.
Mm.
So I was just thinking about, okay, how am I going to earn money and, I don't know, do something fun? And I met a friend on campus and I asked him what he was doing. He said, oh, I was just looking at teaching English in Asia. And I thought, oh, that's an idea. I'll see a new part of the world and maybe hopefully earn some money while I'm doing it and pay off some of this
Mm.
debt.
Mm.
And so I started looking for it. The first thing I found was come to Japan, teach English. I applied for it. I got the job. So yeah, pretty soon I was on my way to Japan. So that's basically how it happened. And it was one of those things I made the plan to come here for 1 year, and it's been 22 years now. So
Mm. Mm.
I got stuck somewhere along the way.
Such a gorgeous country and culture. I was in Italy last week with my dad, and we were just having pasta, pizza the whole way through, and I was like, God, just nothing has ever compared to Japanese food for me. There's something about it. It's so fresh, so nice. The people are so lovely. There's something about the culture that, like, if I had to live somewhere else, I reckon it'd be Japan. So you just fell in love with the culture. That's really nice. Um, I wonder, how does that everything we've been talking about, how does that compare to Japanese culture? Is there any move or shift towards digital ID or tyranny or any of these things that we're talking about in, from what you can see, the Eastern, I guess, sphere as well? Because you
Yes.
don't hear much about that, or I don't hear much
No,
about that.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, they call it a global agenda or a new world order agenda because it
Mm.
does affect absolutely all of the globe and
Mm.
certainly here in Japan. So, no matter what aspect of the agenda that you're talking about, whether it's digital ID or biometric facial recognition scanning and all of that, it is here in various forms. And it
Mm.
takes different, it has a different cultural flavor in different places, but it's all the same agenda. So, for example, I did a report recently on my newly released Japanese translation of my book. Reportage has been released in
Mm.
Japan, so I did a report on that and talked about that. But as I was on the way to the book launch in Osaka, I got to pass through or I didn't pass through, but I saw the facial recognition gates that they've installed
Mm.
in the
Mm.
Osaka subway system. Uh, Basically, on the back of the Expo hype from last year. Oh, it's the World Expo. Let's do something cool. Biometric facial recognition gates so that you don't
Mm.
have to use a ticket or even scan your smartphone. No, your face is your pass, and
Mm.
that's that sort of thing is being at least somewhat normalized, or they're trying to introduce that to Japanese culture. Um, and another thing that I've definitely noticed is one thing that I really quite enjoyed when I came here is that cash is definitely still king in Japan. You can use cash everywhere. No one bats an eyelid if you use cash anywhere, including even purchasing a car with cash. Certainly, it can be done. It's been done.
Mm. Mm.
So that I really appreciated that because at the time that I was leaving Canada, it was becoming basically all electronic payments all the time. Obviously, it's probably there at this point, and people look at cash as a strange thing at this point. But so when I moved here and it was all cash, I'm like, well, this suits me fine. I like this. But over certainly the last 5 or 6 years, I'd say the electronics payment systems have definitely come in and are becoming more popular. So
Mm.
it again that part of the agenda, digital ID. There is something called the My Number card here in Japan, which was introduced really on the back of a scandal with the pension system here. Basically, the record keeping of the old pension system was just atrocious, and
Mm.
files were lost, and people were losing their pensions and stuff. And there was this big scandal. How are we going to solve this? I have an idea. Let's put all of your information from all your government interactions into one card, one number that we'll give you that'll follow you around for your whole life and that you'll have to present everywhere. And hey, it'll be this shiny new My Number card, and it'll be great, guys. It'll combine all these services and everything. And of course, it is just the digital ID infrastructure that's being built right now. It's not very advanced yet, but it is coming, and it's gradually replacing all of the things that you used to have. You used to have a health insurance card that you would show to the doctor when you go to the doctor, but now it's all part of this same card that you scan that has all of this information on it. What could go
Mm.
wrong? Of course,
Mm.
There has already been scandals about various data leaks from
Yeah.
various government agencies, but again, it's just part of that same global agenda that's playing out everywhere. So, unfortunately, yes, Japan is very much in the same boat as everyone else. It just might look different, it might proceed at a different pace, but it's definitely happening here too.
Yeah, the big one that springs to mind for me is the UK Biobank. It was called the sort of massive health data that is collected by loads of doctors and is apparently quite useful for research studies and things like that. But it was hacked. I don't remember if it was a Chinese hack or what, but they basically stole millions of British patients' health data. It's a really annoying one because you do have all this beautiful new technology like a Fitbit and you can sort of like track your health, but now in America, from what I understand, there's loads of companies where what they do is that you are required to sort of track your health because you get a lower insurance premium with your business or whatever. And it feels like it feels like we could potentially shift to a utopian idea. Like there's so much good technology, but it is always linked to something terrible, a company stealing your data. You can't get a Roomba without Amazon or whatever company stealing your floor plan so that they can sell you more towels because your bathroom needs more towels. Do you think that the only way forward is tyranny? There's no way forward using all this technology that could be positive?
You make a good point, and it's one that is often made by Ernest Hancock. He runs a website called Freedom's Phoenix. He does a
Mm.
weekly radio program. I'm on with him every couple of weeks, and we discuss this quite a bit in our
Mm.
conversations. And he always makes the point, I want Jarvis, not
Jarvis,
Alexa.
well, Iron Man.
Right. As in,
Yeah.
his point is the technology itself isn't a bad thing. In fact, I want it. I want to be able to use it. But I
Mm.
want my personal version that I control, that's for me. I don't want, the Alexa version that's beaming all the information back home to Amazon headquarters all the time.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yeah, I certainly think there is a case to be made. The technology itself isn't inherently evil. It's just
Mm.
who controls it and in
Mm.
what way is that control being exerted. And unfortunately, just given the economics and technological infrastructure that has been built around us, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to build that Jarvis future rather than the Alexa future because
Mm.
we are so dependent on the technological infrastructure of these corporations that can afford and that have been essentially placed into the positions in the economy that they are. For people who don't know about that, I've done work on the secrets of Silicon Valley that people should look up about how the Silicon Valley and big tech companies have been founded, funded, and seeded with the help of military and intelligence agencies from the very inception. Silicon Valley was a military project that became an intelligence agency project, and that is reflected in every one of the big tech companies in one way or another. And once you have that in mind, then you have to understand that all of this technology that we are being allowed to purchase is coming with strings attached, gigantic strings attached. And obviously, everything we do and everything we say on these controlled devices are being beamed back to headquarters in one way or another. I mean, we've known for 20 years that the NSA has literal splitters in the trunk lines coming through of the internet, all the data coming through the internet, that one line goes out to your telecom provider, the other line goes into a secret room that they have in the back door of AT&T that's sealed off, that's only accessible by NSA agents. Wow, I wonder what they're
Mm.
doing with all that data back there. So
Mm.
I mean, we've known about that for decades. All of this information is being collected and used for control. And to my mind, the really scary part of this is the sort of the longer term implications of this, because of course the things that are happening on the day-to-day basis are scary enough. But when we start to think about the way this information can be used and shaped, and this technology can be used to shape ourselves individually and our life paths, it starts to add up to something that changes not just our society, not just our civilization, but humanity itself. And I say that advisedly. There was you mentioned earlier about Google and the way they can show certain search results or not, depending on your
Sure.
location or your demographics or whatever. And I
Mm.
remember seeing them bragging about that in one of their blue sky projects or whatever they call it that they were working on. One of their projects was how can we de-radicalize people who have been
Mm.
radicalized, extremist content online. And they were bragging about how they can completely tailor someone's search experience so that they can basically be led along a path towards they'll only get the information that Google wants them to get, and they'll be steered away from whatever terrorist websites they're visiting or what have you. And they, of course, they were bragging about this. But even more chilling, there was a video that came out, I don't know, I think something almost like a decade ago, called The Selfish Ledger. And it was an internal Google video by Googlers for Googlers. It was internal to the company. But it was this interesting presentation, and people should watch it. I think it's only like 10 or 11 minutes long. It's watchable. And basically, they are making the point that you can imagine there's a ledger of all the activities that you have done in your life, the things that you've bought, the people you've talked to, the places you've gone, etc. There's this gigantic ledger that is your life. And if you want to think about it on the grander scale, of course, your ledger and your wife's ledger, and that feeds into your children's ledger and their children, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have this societal, this global system of all these ledgers that are passing information and experiences on one to another in this chain. And they started making the point in this video that through manipulation, not just of search, but of sort of everything that you are doing online, you can be steered along one path or another. So, for example, if we wanted to make you healthier, we would constantly be showing you the ads for running shoes, or we'd be doing this or that, or tailoring your online experience in this way, so you become this type of person. And again, just thinking about that just for yourself as an individual and what that means for your free will is creepy enough. But then, as they were saying in this video, well, ultimately, with all these ledgers being shaped, we can literally steer the course of humanity. And I guess they're talking about that in a good sense. Like, we can start writing the ledger of the future for the human species with the decisions that we, Google, and our tech overlords are making for you. And maybe that sounds outlandish to people who haven't really thought about it, but I did a podcast episode a few years ago on pricking the filter bubble, where I told the story about how I really ultimately ended up doing the Corbett Report. And I think a large portion of that was due to the internet in 2006. The way that YouTube and Google Video and these types of early iterations of this Web 2.0 was the way that it operated. I was getting content that was interesting to me. I was a politically interested person, so I was watching political stuff, but from within the sort of, conventional two-party paradigm. And then I started getting all these recommendations for these crazy 9/11 videos and other, crazy conspiracy stuff. And I would sometimes click on it just sort of for a laugh, what kind of silly stuff are they talking about? But, eventually I'd click on a video and think, well, that can't be true. Is that really true? And then I'd go look it up and find out, oh yeah, there really was an Operation Northwoods, and the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff really did sign off on this plan to kill Americans, even in a plan to blame it on Cuba to start a war with them, and all this crazy stuff that sounds absolutely outlandish when you first hear it, and then you look it up and you find out it's real. So in a sense, I guess I was radicalized by the early YouTube algorithm and its recommendations, and that's what started to set me along the path that ultimately became the Corbett Report and everything that I do. So I know that there is something to this, that really we can be shaped by these algorithms and recommendations in ways that we can't know. We can guess, we can surmise, we can sort of see the details of it, but we can't know on the grander scale how much of our online experience now is being curated for us so that we become a certain type of person. And the real question, again, it's not that the technology itself is inherently evil, but the question is who gets that control? Who is shaping that experience? And do we even think that there is a person back there or people shaping that experience? Or do we think it's all just neutral and it's all just whatever. This recommendation just appeared in my feed for no particular reason. Well, if we do think that, we're being naive. And so, is there a way to use this technology for good and for utopia? Well, I suppose we can imagine it, but there's a huge gulf between the imagination and between being able to actually implement that. And I don't know how we get from here to there without some radical changes in the way that we are at least even thinking about this technology, let alone how we are using it.
Yeah, I think one of the things about, well, at least the thing I see with my sort of generation is that people don't have the context, right? People don't have the context for 9/11. I'd only learned in the last 6 months. I learned about the Olympics. What was it, the Israeli Olympian team
Yeah.
that
In
was sort of taken
Munich.
away and killed? And yeah,
Right.
I'd only learnt about that recently. You didn't realize that. Oh, I can't remember what the documentary series was. It was the Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem. I can't
Ah,
remember
okay.
his
Yes. Yeah,
name.
yeah, yeah.
It was like a 22-hour series about the sort of history of the Palestinians and the Israelis, and nobody
Mhm.
has that context. They just kind of have now, and it was like it was so good about the Fauci book by RFK as well. As you realize, there's kind of a long-standing history of the same people in the same bits of power trying to do this over and over and over again, and you go, oh, it makes sense now. And when you've got people of sort of my generation, I'm 28, who don't have that and have grown up with the
Yeah.
internet and have grown up with not quite TikTok, but we sort of got into TikTok and Instagram, but just kind of just rolling news over and over all the time. You don't have that context to understand. And then you hear something like 9/11, there was something dodgy about it, but then there's all the memes about Bush did 9/11 and people kind of just push that away and they don't want to listen to you. But yeah, it is kind of insane. And then there's the thing about like technology companies, and this was something that you were talking about recently, was I want to say Oracle. It might have been Palantir. I think it was Oracle. And their context and the way they started was sort of an intelligence military project. And I just don't think anything, the more I find, the more I read, I don't think anything happens by accident. There's like a pandemic or HIV or an attempted assassination or a bombing. It just seems like every single thing, Charlie Kirk, it just seems like every single thing has got some other string and nothing really happens by accident. And I couldn't remember, I think it was Google I was looking up the other day because I'd remembered something about them starting off in intelligence. And technically, if you speak to ChatGPT and you ask this question, did it start in intelligence the way a lot of tech projects do? And it's no, they actually won a grant, but the grant was funded by NASA and DARPA and some other agencies, but they weren't with intelligence or the military or anything. It's like, oh right, okay, that makes sense. Thank you for
Settled.
yeah, informing me there. It is quite scary. This is something I've heard you talk a bit about, is this sort of shift towards just the digital world in general, CBDCs, digital ID. Now we're talking about transhumanism, and that seems like it might be a lot closer than we previously projected. And the scary thing is that, yeah, there's no omnipotent, peaceful source of any one of these things. If we all shift and we're all cyborgs in 5 to 10 years' time, someone's going to control your left robotic arm. I'm curious what you think about this sort of shift that we have now with AI and transhumanism. And is there any way that this could be a positive thing, or is it just a slow shift towards 1984 and tyranny?
Very good questions. The answer is yes. And oh, by the way, on whether I was talking about Oracle or Palantir with regards to
Mm.
intelligence agency ties, actually, both of them. So,
Okay,
and if people are
perfect.
interested,
Mm.
look it up on my site. I've talked about it quite a bit. But yes, so with regards to transhumanism, I believe I first was talking about that, starting to broach the subject in 2009 or something like that, back early days of the Corbett Report website. And back then it did seem like sci-fi kind of fantasy stuff, like merging men with machines and brain chips and stuff. Like,
Mm.
come on. But unfortunately, sadly, of course, it does seem like we are getting closer and closer to that reality. And my concern about it is essentially the same. Yeah, again, is it possible that these technologies could be used for good purposes? Of course. And that's exactly how they will be sold to the public. Of course, what have we ever only heard from Elon Musk or anyone else trying to promote the brain chip? It'll help crippled people type. They'll be able to
Mm.
think their thoughts and
Mm.
they'll be able to type or communicate. And you don't.
Yeah.
What do you have against helping crippled people? You horrible person.
Mm. Mm.
So that is, of course, how it's going to be sold to the public. But that's not what it's obviously going to be used for. Because, as you say, who is going to be in control of that robotic left arm? Who is going to be the person in charge of that Neuralink brain chip in your skull? It will probably be the person who owns Neuralink, right? And who is
Mm.
Elon Musk, and what is his background, and how did he become the richest man on earth, quote unquote, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, those are the types of things that, unfortunately, only 1 in 100 people will be interested to bother, researching. And if and when they do, yeah, they might be trying to get that information out of TikTok reels or Instagram shorts or whatever, instead of cracking books and listening to long form content, etc. So there's an entire infrastructure and web of technology that prevents people from really digging deep. And that to me is in fact one of the really worrying parts of the trend of technology, is that more and more I am talking to you on a desktop, a physical device that I can control in various ways. Yeah, and yes, sure, it's not perfect, but at any rate, I can do things like when I am searching for information, I can search for a particular piece of information, and if it doesn't come up in my search, I can refine my search and I can try again and I can try a different search engine and I can do this and I can do that. But I think that we are clearly heading towards a state where it's not going to be a physical device that you control, that you have any sort of power over, that you're typing commands into. It's going to be, the handheld smartphone sort of thing that will be the Oracle, the Alexa type Oracle. And you say, Alexa, tell me what happened on 9/11, and it will tell you exactly what the official story of 9/11 is. And how are you going to refine that search? And what are you going to do? No, the information is just presented to you as is, and that's what people are being trained at with ChatGPT and others. ChatGPT, tell me about, was Google an intelligence project? No. I mean, and again, what do you do with that information? Getting back to the transhumanist side of this, I think again this speaks to the point of the control of these types of systems and what they are being used for, and I think when I examine the people in the global oligarchy who are interested in this technology, I think there are true believers. I think someone like Ray Kurzweil, for example, is a true believer in this technology. And he's weirdly obsessed with his dead father and never dying. And he has this female cyber persona called Raymona that he likes to
Oh, I didn't know about
as.
that.
Oh,
Right.
he's a crazy, weird guy, but an incredibly important guy who's working at Google and writing about the singularity is near and all of that kind of stuff. And I think he genuinely believes in this, and he genuinely believes we're going to merge with the machines and go forward into the brave new world, etc. And I think there are probably other people in this oligarchy who are at least cynically using this fantasy that they're selling to the nerds who will be helping them to create the digital panopticon that will probably not provide us with this cyber utopia, but at any rate will be a good enough cyber prison in order to keep the prisoners in line. And that's where my mind goes with this. It would be, from the perspective of the would-be controllers, what could be better than if people literally took implants in their skulls that we could literally beam information into and people would just accept it? Isn't that the ultimate control grid system? But even if it doesn't work like that or doesn't work as well as that, at any rate, even half measures will be sufficient. Even if they could just get, I don't know, everyone to carry around some sort of device that locates them at all times and listens into their conversations and sees who they're interacting with and sees what they're buying. Oh, wait, everyone is carrying that around now and are paying for the privilege of doing so. Yay, I couldn't live without my smartphone. So
Yeah.
it really isn't much of a leap to go from that towards putting that physically into your body in some way. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are willing and happy to accept that technology once it comes.
There's a word I've heard thrown around different YouTube channels as well as yours is panopticon. So a word I've not heard in a very long time, and I love that example. For listeners who don't know, a panopticon was this idea, I want to say from the 18 or early 1900s, and it was a circular prison with a tower in the middle, and the the guard could sort of look and see any prisoner at one point in time. And I believe the idea behind it was that the prisoners couldn't see the guard, and so they didn't know at any one time if they were being watched or not watched. So they were always on their best behavior. What was it? I don't remember if it was Peter Thiel or if it was someone who was talking recently, and I think you've spoken about it as well, of the idea that you've got these security cameras and they're always switched on. I can't remember. It was some sort of conference where they're saying... Larry Ellison, yeah, and he was talking about if you go to the toilet as a police officer, you can supposedly switch off your police body cam, but it won't ever really be off, because if someone has a warrant and can secure that footage, they can get it if they want to. So it's this idea that everyone is surveilled all of the time and they don't know if they're being surveilled. So it's sort of this nanny state. I watched this interview recently. It was with Mark Zuckerberg and I think the Rundown AI, where they were talking about their new Meta glasses. So you put on these glasses and they don't look clunky and shit anymore. They're sort of Ray-Ban and they're cool and trendy and they're not super heavy and bulky. And you've got a wristband that you get with it. So you can sort of, it's not even an iPhone anymore. It's a thing where you sort of just very subtly move your fingers to the point where you wouldn't even be able to tell. But you and I could be having a conversation and I could be sort of like texting someone and send a quick text with just subtle movements of my wrists. And so it's like how, if we're doing that now, and people keep talking about was the Moore's law, which I learned about the other day. I'd sort of heard of it before, but it's how technology increases exponentially and it gets better. It doubles in how good it is every 18 months, or it halves in how expensive it is to run it every 18 months. And if we're doing that now, it's going to be to the point where we're slapping a chip in our brains and we're to Black Mirror in no time, which is quite scary. I was speaking with Callum Chase a couple of days ago, who's in the AI sphere, and he's quite positive about the transhumanist idea. I'm to the point now where I wasn't that worried about it, and now I don't really see any way out of it. It feels like that is the only way people can go.
All right. Well, then let me provide a ray of sunshine potentially
Please,
towards this, which
please.
is that I think the younger generation does understand this in a way that a lot of older people probably don't, because palpably, obviously, we have seen the rise of the AI resistance movement, most notably among the young, who know that it is their lives and livelihoods and futures that are on the chopping block here, and that they are essentially being made obsolete, and they're being asked to train the AI and then just roll over and die, I guess. And a lot of people are not accepting that. So we saw the phenomenon, for example, of all the graduating speeches of people trying to hype AI and being booed off the stage as a result of it. And I really do think there is quite a movement that's arising in with that sort of mindset that this isn't, because speaking as a Gen Xer and someone who's getting older, I think we have been inculcated our entire lives with the idea that technology is continually improving, and with it is improving lives. It improves the world as we get more and more technologically sophisticated. But I think now there is that dawning realization, and it's probably most palpable in the youth, that actually technological progress may not be societal progress. And if we can break that association, maybe that's to the good. And you mentioned, for example, the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. Oh, they're so cool, stylish. But actually, I've heard, I'd like to believe this anyway, that the new trend is to call them perv glasses and to shame people for wearing them because they
Yeah.
could be recording people at all times and whatever. And so there is a growing societal movement of pointing that out and going, that guy's wearing the perv glasses, and shaming people for doing that. I think that is a hopeful sign that at the very least, I think there are people who are starting to really get this on an instinctual level. And of course, it's not coming from the older generations who have been behind the building up of the system. It's the younger people who are going to have to put their lives on the line for this technology, this technological infrastructure that just trust us, guys. It's going to take care of you. Don't worry, guys. It'll all be nirvana and utopia. I think a lot of people aren't buying it.
Yeah, there was I can't remember his name, but it was recently in the news, the reform minister who was wearing some sort of it was maybe Meta glasses or maybe another company wearing some sort of AI glasses, and he would record all of his private meetings, private council meetings or whatever, and all the women were like, can you please switch them off because it's a little bit creepy, and he didn't, and then it was in the news. And so yeah, perv glasses, that's a good idea. It's the thing I worry about, and I could be misattributing this quote. It might have been Stephen Hawking who was saying that we are moving towards an age of AI. It could be utopia, it could be dystopia, but the most interesting thing is what happens before that point. And this is kind of, I know a lot of people are saying it, but it is true. It is kind of the most interesting time to be alive, because what happens kind of in the next maybe 20 to 50 years is going to completely reshape how humanity works forever. And I would hope that there's a revolution amongst younger people. And that people wouldn't just grow up, because I sort of imagine it as like I had little cousins that grew up with a Nintendo DS, for example, and they were just playing that from the time that they were really, really young, so that by the time they were older, they were hooked. And you see that now, babies with iPads, so they're sort of hooked from day one to YouTube Kids and whatnot. And I do really think that whichever way it goes in the next, I'll say 50 years to round it off, but I just, it could go either way. And I think the younger generations, if we're sort of, if there's a revolution now towards jobs because people aren't getting jobs when they come out of universities, what happens when children grow up in a world where nobody really has jobs and maybe we all are on universal basic income and kids grow up with iPads and technology and meta glasses from day one. So by the time they get to 10 or 15, they're not there's no revolution against that anymore. They've grown up with it. So by the time they go, "Oh, just get a chip and then you don't need to wear the glasses." It'd be like, "Yeah, of course." Sort of now it'd be like, "Wear the glasses and you don't need the iPhone anymore." It's a really strange time to be alive.
It absolutely is.
Mm.
But as you say, and as
Mm.
I've said before, yes, probably the most interesting, exciting time to be alive in human history because, yes, I think that the future of the human species, the fate of humanity, is being decided as we speak in the
Mm.
coming years, anyway. And I don't say that lightly. And I don't think that, I mean, obviously, every generation tends to think that their issues are the big ones. But I would say that we are just, as a species, getting to the point where, yes, we are going to, there's going to be some sort of deciding factor here in the coming years and decades. And um, in a way, this all goes back to the fundamental question. So back 2010, I want to say, I wrote the foreword to a book called Revolve: Man's Scientific Rise to Godhood by Aaron Franz. I don't know anymore if I have lost touch with him, but he was a podcaster talking about transhumanism, etc. back 2009, 10, back before it was popular to talk about. And he asked me to write the foreword to his book. And that forward, I essentially boiled it down to the question: what does it mean to be human? That is the question that we are going to have to answer. We're going to have an answer to that, or an answer will be supplied to us along those lines in the very near future. And it's not some sort of theoretical, abstract, philosophical pondering as maybe it used to seem. It is a very real question that we're going to have to actually answer. And I was just today listening to a recent Joe Rogan conversation with Nick Bostrom, and they're talking about
Mm.
AI and what's society going to look like on the other side of the AI revolution, and et cetera, et cetera. And Joe Rogan sitting there making the point, well, maybe, it's absolutely crazy that people spend decades of their lives working jobs just to put a roof over their head and food on the table. And maybe we'll look back on that as archaic times. Why were people doing that? And when now, people can do whatever they want because everything's supplied to them, so they can finally pursue their passions and their hobbies and their dreams and things that they're interested in, and build things that they're interested in, and whatever, become great artists, etc. But actually, of course, as we are seeing the actual AI revolution taking place, well, actually, no, some of the very first things to be automated are all of the things that we were supposed to use this technology to allow us to go do on it by ourselves. Now, the AI is creating the art, the AI is
Mm.
creating the music, the AI is doing all of these pursuits and endeavors that, wait, wasn't this what we were supposedly creating this technology so that we could go off and enjoy? What is even the point of going and writing a song when you can literally just type a prompt and you can get one in 10 seconds?
Mm.
All of these things. And I think there are real answers to that. And
Mm.
there's obviously real meaning to real human interaction between real humans doing organic things in the real world. And as I say, I think probably the younger generation understands that even better than people of my vintage. So I am hopeful that there will be an answer forthcoming to that. And I really do think that we are on the cusp of a potential revolution of people rejecting technology and technological spaces, at least to some extent and in some domains. And maybe people will actually reevaluate and revalue actual real world, in person, organic, authentic human music, for example.
Mm.
I don't
Mm.
want to listen to some whatever 99% AI generated by some guy on a computer. I want to go into a room where people are playing physical instruments and celebrate that. And I think there is the room for that kind of rediscovery of the authentic human experience and its importance. And we could potentially recapture that. And that to me, again, is an exciting possibility for us to finally really make a decision, not just sort of go along with this technology wherever it's taking us, but to actually make a decision. No, we want to do this because we are human, and we will celebrate the humanness of our humanity.
Mm.
That would be a great thing to result from this. I'm not holding my breath. Certainly, it's not decided that it will go in that direction, but it's at least a possibility. And I think it's exciting that we are here being part, not just spectators to all of this. We are part of this great unfolding story. And our decisions every single day are either sending us towards that future of the authentic organic human experience or towards whatever AI riddled digital dystopia we're heading towards. We are part of that decision. And I think
Yeah.
that's humbling and amazing and exciting and scary in equal measures.
Yeah, it's one of the main arguments I hear, particularly around music and film and um, acting. I'll say video games, whatever, creation of anything is you can go out to a live concert and you can experience that, in person for yourself, surrounded by people who are really there, tribally feeling the music, and that's great for in person. It's good for concerts, but I think the majority of the music that we digest is on Spotify or Apple Music at home because nobody has the money to go to concerts more than they listen to an album at home. So it still doesn't really answer that question. And I would hope that if there's a transition, and I don't actually know that much about the younger generation sort of rejecting AI. I've seen the graduation speeches that you're talking about, but I haven't heard much about that. I'd hope that if we can shift away from that, then maybe people can start to realize something Russell Brand talks about. He talks about awakening from the slop, not the AI slop, but the news slop, is like who controls the narrative. I'm curious, how do you get your news? How do you switch off? Because it seems like every day I'm finding out that some independent news organization that I listen to or get a newsletter from, it turns out was another cutout of USAID or the CIA. Or how do you keep up with that to make sure that you're getting genuine information as opposed to just maybe a slightly different variation on whatever the government wants you to hear?
Well, I think the key for me has always been, and I've always promoted the idea that I am not trusting sources of information. I'm trusting information that I can verify in some way, or that I can triangulate, or that corresponds with my view of reality, and that I can see, at least in some way provides me some sort of window of insight into what's really happening in the world. Preferably information that actually gives me predictive ability, so that, I know that this person is in touch with that person and that they're on this board and they control this agenda, so I can tell that this is going to go that direction. And it's, of course, a process. Obviously, no one has 100% view of everything that's happening and everything that's going on, but you can at the very least course correct if you are treating information in that way. And you see, and you're trying to make predictions, and you see, that didn't happen the way I thought. Why didn't it happen? And you can go and re-examine some of your assumptions and see if you had the information wrong that way. And in that case, if you're pursuing information in that way, the source itself doesn't particularly matter. Now, to a certain extent, obviously, we are all just human beings with limited amounts of time and energy and resources, so we can't look at everything that's being said by everyone in the world. We have to limit it in some way. But having said that, I try to cast as broad a net as possible, and I try, to the extent that's possible, I don't allow algorithms and social media middlemen to come between me and sources of information that I'm interested in. So I've been blowing the horn on about RSS for a number of years now, and I'm going to do it here again because not enough people know about this or understand it.
I don't know about this.
Well, okay, great. So people of my age probably should remember RSS. Maybe they don't, but they've probably seen the logo. It's like dot with.
I know what RSS is, and I still use it for my own.
But unfortunately, a lot of people don't anymore, and I get a lot of blank expressions when I talk about this. So anyway, RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication. It was a protocol that was developed 2.5 decades ago. It is the basis for podcasting itself, what made podcasting possible, and all it is essentially is. It looks like code. I mean, it's a form of Markdown, and it's basically just code that is telling your device or your feed reader, essentially, to contact this server over here and see if there's anything new, and if there is, it'll tell you about it. And that's all it's doing. But that's what enabled podcasting. So instead of having to subscribe to some third-party service to tell you that, this person is posting this thing. No, you are just directly getting information directly from somebody's server if there is information or not. And it sounds like a simple thing, but it actually makes a huge difference because I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Insta. I'm not following news in that way. I have a number of sources of information I look at. Some that I do think is on the level, and I do think that they're probably real people that are really trying to give me information. Some that I know is corporate media propaganda, because I want to know what the corporate media propaganda is so that I can better understand where they're coming from, etc. And so I have a wide list of sources, and I follow their RSS feeds. And so I have a feed reader where all of these feeds are telling me every single day. I go through a couple of hundred articles, at least the headlines, and I go, decide whether I want to read this article or not. And I go and read through probably a couple dozen articles every single day and discard the rest. And that is how I'm keeping up with the news. And the best part about this is there's no social media middleman. I don't have to sign up for any service. There's no account. There's no algorithm. There's no recommendation for you feed that's trying to algorithmically manipulate me one way or another. It's just literally an itemized list in chronological order of headlines from the sources that I want to follow. Wow, what a brilliant idea, and how simple, and that's all there is to it. It's such a simple technology that I think a lot of people just don't even understand it when they see it. But honestly, I think that that is the way, at least for me, to follow this information without getting sucked down all the rabbit holes, etc. And I've been off of Twitter for, what, eight years now or something like that, and I'm happy for that. I don't think I've missed out from not being on a service like that.
Yeah, I do say that because I've got X now and TikTok and Instagram, and whereas you've got the very left-wing thing on X and TikTok, it's very right-wing. Oh, sorry, very right-wing on X, very left on TikTok and Instagram. And it's, it's useful to, like you say, diversify and get some information, but it's mostly just heavy right-wing. I guess the word is shit posting, and then left wing shit posting, and it's like, okay, I've had enough for today. I will round off with this question because it's one of my favorite things to ask: is how do you, because you have produced so much content for a while on so many different things, how do you switch off? How do you get away from it if you do?
Yeah, it is a good question because essentially the website is my life, as people might be able to get. I mean, given the amount of stuff that I'm putting out on a weekly basis, it requires almost all of my time. I do have a family, and so I do switch off to spend time with my family. And I do enjoy playing music, and I have my hobbies and interests, so there is time for that. But yeah, no, a lot of the time, it's one of those things. I mean, I guess I'm blessed to actually want to do the thing that I'm doing. And I recognize that is kind of a position of privilege that I'm in. Even if I was working some, 9-to-5 job doing whatever, I would still be interested in this and doing it to the extent that I could at nighttime, because I'm just that type of person. I'm wired this way. This is what I want to do. But hey, I'm supported by an audience that helps to make this possible. So I get to do this for a living. It's great. But yeah, I do sometimes have problems of maybe I should just take some time off, take a breather. I'm constantly doing this. And it's one of those things where when you have a structure, like I have podcasts, I have editorials, I do interviews. And so whenever I'm looking at anything, even passively, even if I just, passing a TV and I see something on there, I'm like, oh, that would make a good episode. I should talk about that.
Turning over.
It's constantly there. So I don't think I could turn it off even if I wanted to. But luckily, as I say, I'm just wired this way. I'd be doing this even if it wasn't my job. So.
Well, it's great. You do a great job. I've followed you for a long time. I've learned so much from you on so many different things. So yeah, well done. Congrats. Please keep going because it's amazing. Can you please tell people where they can find all your brilliant work in journalism?
Yes. The best place to go is CorbettReport.com, CORBETT report.com. I am on YouTube, Rumble, Archive, BitChute, whatever, a bunch of different places. But
which I think is banned in the UK now. I hadn't seen BitChute before. I think I saw it on your website, and it's now banned in the UK. So that's a bit fun. Maybe you need a VPN.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
go on
because
Rumble.
of Ofcom and the whatever draconian rules they brought in. Yes. So exactly because of that, government censorship or YouTube censorship or whatever, you never know what platform I'm going to be scrubbed from next. So go to CorbettReport.com. That will be the last line until they start seizing, thought criminals' individual websites. And while you're there, check out the RSS feeds, and you can subscribe and get everything delivered to your feed reader automatically. You don't need to sign up for anything. You just get it automatically. Hey, it sounds like a great deal, right? And so I have thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of audio, video content, text, and it's all available for free. So check it out, enjoy it, learn from it. If you find it to be a valuable resource and you want to support it, you can become a member of the website. But please don't do that unless and until you've checked out my work and you really know what I'm doing, because I just want people who really understand and want this work to support it. I'm not here to, try to sell to every single person who comes across my website. No, if you like this work and you want it to continue in the future, then you can support it.
Hopefully you have the opportunity to. Hopefully nobody shuts it down, because it's been great. Amazing. Thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your sleep. You can finally power down now.
Thank you.